Okay, so let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting. We actually have a defective board here, but if you'll remember, one of the issues a lot of you had was not installing your LEDs the correct way. So make sure your circuit is working, because you can actually look at the stem and see that the long side is positive. The board is designated with a small negative for each one of these. Let's see if we can get that to focus. So make sure the short is on the negative. Now, this board was installed correctly but did not light up. At this point here, this LED was lighting up, and so we checked voltage, and we had voltage at this point on this LED. So, in order to troubleshoot the problem, we can follow out our little traces, and let's get a little close look at that. When we examine these traces, if we look very, very closely, we'll see the negative lead on this comes along the outside of the board to the negative on the next LED. And if we follow that all the way down, we'll see it's also on the negative on the other LED. So that little trace on the board is a tiny bit of copper stripping laid on the board and paint coated over. So that should have continuity. That's the same as a wire. So let's start here. I'll put my meter on diode check. And so I'm going to begin tracing out these leads. And so I'm going to just start with the negative, the outside lead. So I should have continuity between these 2 points. I do not. Let's check this point. So that tells me, because I checked it here, and I can come out just a little bit. And see, I have continuity between these 2 points here. See if we can get a little bit of a zoom on that. So I have continuity between these 2 points on the board, which means that I should also have continuity between these 2 points. Since I do not, that tells me that somewhere between these 2 points, that solder trace is broken on the board. Now, I could try to scrape that. I could look at it. I'll tell you that the trace is probably so small that you're better off simply installing a wire between those 2 points. So you would actually solder a wire on this solder pad to this solder pad, and we would fix the problem. Now let's check the positive side, these LEDs. So I'm going to come over here and see if I have continuity between these two. And I do. So following my trace out, let's get really, really close. I know that I have continuity between these outer tabs. There should be the entire board. And so checking the positive, I see I have continuity here. If I was to follow this trace out, I would see it comes along over here. And it also ends onto the positive of this far LED. So I should also have continuity between that point. And I do not. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to check continuity between these 2 points. Now I'll see now that this is not working, which tells me I have a bad trace on this board located between these 2 points here. And since I had no continuity between any of these, I would also say that somewhere on here is another bad trace. You would simply find out which trace is bad, and solder a wire from point A to point B to bypass that trace and fix this board.